From a failed entrepreneur with multiple businesses being run into the ground under his oversight to a founding father of the United States of America, Samuel Adams was enthralled with politics from an early age. His passion was seen as somewhat of a detriment to his character decades before the Revolutionary War. Unable to focus on his early career paths due to his preoccupations with the rising tensions between the colonies and Great Britain, even at one point attempting to start a brewery before giving up on it to take a more active role in local government. Once he got a taste for politics, however, he knew he had found his calling, and there was nothing that could stop him from rallying the colonists against the British government, whether by writing articles in the newspaper, helping plan the Boston Tea Party, or deterring loyalists. He would dedicate the rest of his life to the creation of the United States of America. This is the story of Samuel Adams, one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. And this is Learn Something New. Samuel Adams was born on September 16, 1722, to fairly prominent parents Samuel Adams Sr. and Mary Adams. His father was politically active within their community and supported the ideas of colonial self-governance, something that the younger Adams would carry with him as he entered adulthood, and could be seen as early as his time enrolled at Harvard College. After diving deep into the writings of many of the political philosophers that came before, Adams wrote for his graduate degree thesis about the legality of resisting British authority, decades before the Revolution would actually begin to take shape. But after graduating, he wasn't really sure what to do with himself, with an intense passion for political ideas that the general public hadn't really come around to yet. He initially worked under the merchant Thomas Cushing, but quickly lost interest in the work, with Cushing claiming that Adams was far too preoccupied with the political climate of the time to be an effective worker. His father wasn't willing to give up on him, however, giving his son a loan for him to go out and establish his own business. But the funds were quickly squandered, leaving Adams with no choice but to work in his family business, making malted barley and selling it to the local brewers. Shortly after joining, his father passed away, leaving him with full control of the family business. Hoping to expand his offerings, Adams tried to make his own beer, taking out ad space in a newspaper in 1751 which offered strong beer, or malt for those inclined to brew it themselves, to be sold by Samuel Adams at a reasonable rate. For a founding father whose name has become almost synonymous with his titular craft beer in the modern day, Samuel Adams' own beer business was wildly unsuccessful, quickly running out of money and going bankrupt. It seemed finance wasn't Adams' strong suit, which makes it particularly odd as to why in 1756 Boston's local government elected Samuel Adams to the position of tax collector, allowing him the first stable source of income in his adult life. This went about as well as you could predict given his past endeavors. He failed to collect the taxes that the townspeople owed, often being lenient with many who said they couldn't afford to pay their tax bills, but when his ledger didn't balance back at the town hall, he ended up being indebted to the government for the tax he failed to collect. It was only after the end of the 7 Years' War in 1763 that the British government, who had doubled their national debt throughout the conflict, began taxing the colonies directly with the Sugar Act of 1764 and the Stamp Act of 1765. This fired up the public to the point that now Samuel Adams had an audience willing to listen to alternatives to the current political system. He quickly rose as a political representative for Boston and, in part, Massachusetts, which was hit way harder with the effects of the Sugar Act of 1764 because of its reliance on molasses for their rum distilleries. Samuel Adams began writing outright rejections of British rule, many of which were in the same line of thinking at the time, if not more inflammatory to public discontent, as his cousin, fellow founding father and future president, John Adams, writing, "It follows that at once it annihilates the most valuable privileges of our charter, deprives us of the most essential rights of Britons, and greatly weakens the best security of our lives, liberties, and estates." The successful repeal of the Stamp Act meant that the public saw Adams and the other budding revolutionaries' efforts as successful, leading to him to gain a position in the Massachusetts legislature as Clerk of the House. It seems he had finally found his calling in politics, and he set aside nearly everything else in his life to advance his party's goals. As tensions in the colonies rose, Adams was preparing for the difficulties that lay ahead, telling the people to become more self-sufficient prior to the British government sending troops to Boston. Once the soldiers arrived, Adams felt he needed to be more cautious with his criticism of a perceived tyrannical overreach, now writing under a pseudonym. "Will the spirits of the people as yet unsubdued by tyranny, unawed by the menace of arbitrary power, submit to be governed by military force? No." He continued these writings in secret, writing as Vindex and Candidus in the newspaper circulated throughout the colonies. Any animosity he detected within the colonists, he stoked, trying to overcome passivity and capitulation in response to the rising British military response. He wanted to make sure that the soldiers occupying their towns weren't seen as fellow Britons keeping the peace within the colonies, but rather as brutal soldiers who were oppressing citizens only seeking to preserve their own liberties. He teamed up with 8 other Bostonians to form a secretive group called the Loyal Nine. It's believed from this group, the Sons of Liberty emerged with a goal of causing civil disobedience against the British government, including the Boston Tea Party, where they threw 92,000 pounds of British tea into the Boston Harbor after Parliament passed the Tea Act of 1773. The British hated Adams along with fellow Sons of Liberty member John Hancock so much that in an attempt to de-escalate the tensions in 1775, British General Thomas Gage offered amnesty to all Bostonians who stopped their resistance, but excluded both men by name from any hope of avoiding punishment for their actions. Subsequently, soldiers came to arrest them and raid their munitions, but Joseph Warren, another member of the Sons of Liberty, was tipped off about the impending attack, telling 2 couriers, Paul Revere and William Dawes, to ride through the night and alert the militias. They stopped in Lexington to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock first before riding on to Concord. The next morning, April 19, 1775, 700 British troops approached the 77-soldier militia. But as calls for the Americans to lower their weapons were shouted, someone fired the shot that marked the official beginning of the American Revolutionary War. The rest is history. Afterwards, Samuel Adams was chosen as a delegate for the First and Second Continental Congresses. He garnered support for the Declaration of Independence, then helped write the Articles of Confederation, which served as America's first constitution, before serving on several congressional committees as well as the Board of War, and eventually going on to help draft the Constitution for the state of Massachusetts in 1779. And when John Hancock passed away while governor of Massachusetts, Samuel Adams stepped into the role, finishing out Hancock's term before leading the state through 3 more one-year terms. He passed away at the age of 81 on October 2, 1803. Just over a decade and a half later, Thomas Jefferson would write about him, saying, "I can say that he was truly a great man, wise in counsel, fertile in resources, immovable in his purposes. Although not of fluent elocution, he was so rigorously logical, so clear in his views, abundant in good sense, and master always of his subject, that he commanded the most profound attention whenever he rose in an assembly." For those of you in the United States and celebrating our Independence Day, happy 4th of July, and thank you for watching Learn Something New. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Or if you want, you can check out the channel's Patreon, linked below in the description. Special thanks to the channel's Patreons, and as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.